Thank you for joining us this afternoon for a quick tour through sort of the thinking behind a compendium and some best practices around where to start if you are feeling like you're unclear about kind of the purpose or the scope of a compendium. I'm here to just help introduce you to some aspects. The first thing that I'd like to start by saying is that there's no right or wrong way to do a compendium. The backstory on this idea of a compendium actually came out of, I think it was the 10th grade team at Kearney DMD years ago in an effort to bring together documents of various kinds for the students to use with individual classes and amongst all of their project classes. And so it sort of was birthed out of a need to have something that students could utilize. So with that said, I've broken it down, I think, in a logical way. And so let's just go ahead and take a little tour through some ideas and suggestions that I have for you. First of all, the Webster's definition of a compendium is a collection of concise but detailed information about a particular subject, especially in a book or other publication. So a compendium, in the way that we define it, is for the purposes of the project, and it is a collection of a variety of documents that are connected to the project in some way. So that's kind of the formal definition. And I'm sure, like, if you think about like college, you may have had a textbook that was a compendium where that the professor actually put together a collection of documents that were related to the content of that class. That's essentially what we're talking about here. The rationale behind the why is that it's a tool that teachers can use in their classes, in each of their classes, that communicates to students in a variety of ways that their classes and their learning is connected. And so I love it because it's such a regular part of the grade level teams at Kearney DMD and the classes that the students know and always carry their compendium with them, and they have particular pages that are earmarked that they go back to regularly. And what it does is it helps to sort of, it provides like some glue for students to see the connection between their classes in the context of their project, but also in the context of their learning. So I've got just some suggestions for how to go about thinking about what's included in the compendium and then how to actually build it. So my first piece of advice is to start simple. You have seen, and I'll show you here, this is an example of the Kearney 10th grade project from a couple years ago. This does not have to be how you start with a compendium. This is something for this particular team that has evolved over the years, and it has become that. So here's some suggestions for where to start. If you're thinking about your classes and thinking about the supports that you provide students, and a lot of times these come in the structure of like handouts that inevitably get lost in a student's backpack or who knows where else dropped. One of the things for me when I started to develop the 11th grade compendium was that I was tired of constantly handing out these same things to students when they were regular documents that we used all the time. And so I have a couple of examples here that are linked for you just to show you. This first link is a collection of sentence frames that are used for writing and for speaking. This comes out of a book called They Say, I Say. And so this is an example of a tool that students might consult when they're developing their writing and developing their academic language, which could be happening in science or math or English or history. So it's not something that's strictly literacy in in the purpose, well, strictly English in the purpose that it serves, but it does serve literacy. So thinking about common graphic organizers or moving your team toward having more common graphic organizers. So that's another example of something that you might include in the compendium. I included this link to an analytical paragraph. This is something that has evolved over the years at Kearney for common practices about how to write analytically. And so this is just simply a breakdown for how to put that paragraph together. We use it in English and in science and history. And so that would be an example of a tool that would make sense in the compendium. Another thing that is powerful is to include like key standards that you're using in the project. For students to be able to read and annotate their standards is really powerful. So it could be through the lens of the critical concepts or through the lens of particular pages from the Common Core standards, but that's another example of something that helping to make learning visible for students. I included a link here to an example. In my opinion, it's a very rudimentary example, but I wanted to really show you how it all started, at least for the 11th grade team that I was on. And this is probably, I don't know, maybe, well, I think maybe it says the year on it. Nope. So maybe 2015. I mean, this is old. And basically what we did was we scanned it and just put in the resources that we were finding that we were using across content area. And so different rhetorical strategies are included in here, sentence frames, academic language, more academic language that I wanted students to be using to have variety in their writing. So I'm taking you on a tour through this to show you. So then the history teacher brought in the themes that she uses throughout. We have an academic summary template, and then some pieces from our media teacher in the principles of design. The reason that I wanted to show that to you is that this is a 19-page document that we photocopied and gave to students, and they used it in their classes. And so it was stapled, they kept it in their binders, but what it did was it reduced that need for us of having to constantly photocopy those different resources that we were constantly referencing. And then as you can see, we put it into a PDF so that students could reference it digitally if they wanted to as well. So it could be as simple as starting there is really the point that I wanted to make with using that example. As you're thinking about the compendium in the context of your project, you want to think about what are some of the essential project elements that you will be coming back to and referencing. And so here's a couple of examples from the work that you're doing these 2 weeks. How powerful is it to have the project synopsis in the compendium as a place where students can look at the overview of the project? Who's the client? What's our launch? What's our culminating event? So all of that information is visible to the students, so they are fellow participants in the learning and in the scope of the project from the very beginning. The roadmap as well, so that they can see how the assignments that they'll be completing in various classes are connected to their project. And then we like to include either a common project grade level syllabus or the idea of including your individual course syllabus. That's always nice because then again, you know, so often we send that syllabus home with students and then it disappears, never to be referenced again. But if it lives in the compendium, that's another place where students can use that as a resource. And then I think something like a calendar is also powerful for including the scope of the project so students can see, oh, it's October. What are the project elements that we're doing in October? And that's visible there for them there in the compendium to reference. I included the exemplar from the project planner And I wanted just to specifically draw your attention to the digital components that are in the exemplar, the compendium portion of the exemplar. So let me just wait till this loads here. So as you can see, in the project planner, one of the things that you are being asked to consider are what are those pieces that you're putting in. And so I included in the exemplar examples for you to think about. You can see I've got the project synopsis. We're always grappling with the planners for students. And so some grade levels at Kearney have actually included a weekly planner in the compendium so that everybody knows it's there. I noticed we have at least one counselor. Hi, Leslie. So like that could be a great resource for counselors to support students in making sure that they're staying organized and keeping on track with things. And then you can see I've got other documents in here that are connected to the project that students were using in the development of, or the initial stages of the project. And then a variety of other documents that are connected to the project and that students would be using at various points in time throughout the project. Another piece, and this would be, so I said start simple, and I would say if you got through 1 and 2, or even number 1, that could be your beginner compendium, and that is entirely sufficient, because the more that students can see these common structures and reference them, the more they're seeing, again, that continuity between our classrooms and the common expectations that we have. And so for any of you who have visited Kearney classrooms, you may be able to attest that that compendium is something that teachers are asking students to take out almost every day to utilize, either in reference to a resource or in reference to some of this information here. So one of the things that could be included are common texts that are used in multiple classes. And so let's say, again, if I've got an article that we're reading in history and English, or an article that connects science and history or math together, I may have texts that are about building background, like I just showed you in the example of the Midway. Within that, this whole idea of shifting our lens. And so if students are in science class and they're annotating for the data and the context of a particular concept, maybe that article then goes into their math class and they're doing more with those numbers and those charts and that data. So the power of being able to have common texts that we're using for meeting our standards in our different grade level classes. And that's essentially what I said there, those multiple opportunities for annotation and building in that habit of mind that there's power in reading a text multiple times for a variety of purposes, and the importance of that. And then in this idea of then what do we do with it? I wanted to talk a little bit about the format. So as I just showed you in the exemplar, you could have a Google Drive folder where all of your compendium pieces are housed, and that is something that the students know how to get there and have access to all the time. So it could be, and this is the way that we did it a number of years, is all of these documents were in one folder that's shared by the team and shared with the students. So that's one option, is to have them only in that digital format. But as a literacy teacher, I am a tremendous advocate for students being able to take that pen or pencil and engage with the text physically. And so that's one of the reasons why Kearney allocates the budget portions of the budget to be able to pay for the reproduction of the compendium, because again, there is something about a student being able to take this out of their binder or their backpack and physically engage with it in their classes. And that's essentially what I said here: marking the text, facilitating close reading. We love the way that it travels from class to class, and it's one of the students' textbooks. I mean, they're constantly being asked to take out and reference and utilize the compendium as a resource. And so with that, I made the comment here about the budget, and then also the way that we do it at Kearney is it's actually, they're checked into the library and barcoded. So when students check their books out, they also check out the compendium. Now it's a consumable, and so they're not returning it at the end, but there is that additional level of accountability that happens from, knowing that they're checking it out from the library. And so if your school site determines that you want to have it reproduced, the way that we do it is the teachers compile it, usually during some combination of the PBL Institute, and then maybe in those weeks leading up to the launch of the school year, and then we send it to what's that called? What's the district place that?
Print services.
Print services, thank you. It gets sent over to print services. Again, it comes out of a portion of the budget, and then they come back, they get barcoded, and when students do their textbook checkouts, that's one of the things that they check out. So the thing that I wanted to say here and really emphasize is that it could live simply as digital, and if we're doing distance learning, that's definitely something that we want to make sure that students have as a resource. But that additional layer of having it in print, I think, is really important and valuable. So that brings me to the end of what, just a quick tour through it. And I want to just open it up for questions that you might have about some of the how that maybe I didn't touch on.